Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to HelpC's live air series. Today, we are truly honored to have Dr. Lorenzo Cohen and Allison Jeffries with us. Lorenzo is a Richard Hines Distinguished Professor in Clinical Cancer Prevention and Director of the Integrative Medicine Program at MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston. He's also on the board of Academic Consortium for Integrative Medicine and Health and is founding member and past president of SIO, Society for Integrative Oncology. Dr. Cohen has published over 125 scientific articles in top medical journals and has edited 2 books on integrative medicine for cancer care. We also have Dr. Lorenzo's partner with us, Allison Jeffries, renowned in her own work for education in this area. She's a former president of the MD Anderson Cancer Center Faculty and Family Organization and works closely with Lorenzo to foster health and wellness in individuals and their communities. Today, we invited them here on HelpC video series to talk about their newly published book on anti-cancer living, transforming your life and health with a mix of 6. We thought it relates very closely to our mission and vision, focusing on whole health approach and listening to Dr. Cohen's perspective on this. So welcome, Lorenzo and Allison.
There.
Hi, Lorenzo. Hi, Allison. Welcome.
I don't know what's going on. Is it, do you have good connection where you are?
Mm-hmm. I have 5G, yes.
Do the video.
It's on.
Yeah, we can see you.
Okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
So do you think I should go off of my my data off my phone and do a hotspot?
No, if it keeps dropping, we'll do that. Otherwise, right now we can see how it's going with this.
Okay, because it's
Okay.
All right. We'll
start again.
We'll start again
From the top.
From the top. Okay. So I already did your introduction. So we'll cut out this middle part. Welcome, Lorenzo, and welcome, Allison. It's such an honor to have you here. I know that you write great books. I was not surprised that there was a new one on the market. And I very much enjoy reading your books and your papers and listening to your lectures. But this one particularly intrigued me about anti-cancer living and your philosophy behind it. So what led you to write this book together and why this title?
Well, Lorenzo and I moved to Houston, and Lorenzo started a job at MD Anderson Cancer Center, and I was teaching, and then we started a family, a young family. And Lorenzo would come home from work every day talking about the research he was doing, his colleagues, international folks in the area looking at lifestyle and cancer. And it was interesting conversation every night at dinner. And then we had this young family, and we realized that we wanted to fill their toolbox with strategies and things that would help them to be healthy adults and young people. And so we started kind of doing things around our house to facilitate that learning for them and to try and ensure that they would grow up to be healthy young adults. And then what we realized was that we weren't living that life. We were putting a lot of effort into our children's lives, but we weren't. And so then we, with a group of friends, decided that we were going to start making changes in our life. And we started making those changes. And then Lorenzo and I, were talking about the things that we were doing, and people asked us to come and speak. to different groups, and we started doing workshops, and we realized that this unique opportunity that we were in, we wanted to share, and people really wanted to understand the science behind cancer and lifestyle and some really effective strategies that they could implement to make change in their life. And so we decided to write a book together, and it took 2 years to bring to fruition. And
what was most surprising in this process and the decision to actually write a book was that people didn't know. And being at MD Anderson and being immersed in the literature and the link between the majority of cancers being caused by our own lifestyle choices, I just kind of have always known that once I learned the science behind all of this, but people just didn't know. There's just a lack of awareness that there's a link between alcohol and cancer, and being overweight and cancer, and being excess sedentary behavior, as we'll get into, and cancer. And there's just this massive knowledge gap. And when people heard, when we gave some talks here and there about this strong association, we saw that they were thankful and empowered. So we saw it in some sense as incumbent to kind of fill this space that wasn't out there in the lay literature, sharing, as Allison said, not only that there is this scientific link and providing the evidence, but now what do you do about it?
Mm-hmm.
So we the people, here we go. Where there's iPhone, link it into your iPhone.
Okay. Okay, good. Hopefully that will be more stable.
The iPhone.
Just go down. There.
So I can hear you, but I don't see you yet. I'm sure you're probably doing that.
Okay, now we are driving off my phone.
Sorry, so being so difficult. Our apologies. So I can pick up and start from what you said. I can take us back.
Start by saying, so after 2 years of working together to put this.
Okay. So after 2 years of working together, we had our book. And on the last day that we saw a draft of our book, Lorenzo was diagnosed with advanced melanoma. So we had this huge shock. We had started a book to talk about prevention and for those people who had a cancer diagnosis, how to improve their outcomes. And we had been talking about it, you know, personally from the prevention side. And suddenly we crossed over and we're now talking about it from the cancer side. So we have this new perspective.
This just so surreal, you know, that the work you've been doing, you both have been doing to impact people in this space and give them actionable hope and evidence on what they can do. At the end of the day, we end up becoming consumers of it ourselves. That then comes back to help us one day. Such an interesting journey. I have so many questions to ask about it, but I'll start with the very first, which is about awareness and access to education. I think this is something that is close to all of our hearts, in the fact that we all are in integrative medicine. We believe in it. We see evidence that it works in certain populations when it's used in the proper way. But as you were mentioning, most of the time people don't know about it, or there is some misinformation or fear around it, as well as on the other side of the spectrum, there are there are things that are not backed by research or that are not effective, right? And when people have these health problems where they are not finding answers, they're looking desperately, um, then it puts a risk for them in terms of knowing what to do and how to do it. Um, so what are your thoughts about how do we increase awareness and education to integrative medicine, and to put it in layman's terms and something that's accessible to people? I think we are both approaching it with the same mission, but from different angles. At HelpC, we are doing it with making access to information possible and simplified, and access to practitioners and recommendations. And you're putting together a book and a toolkit that people can do it. So what are your thoughts about increasing that access and awareness to these different modalities? What are the problems right now, and how can we improve it?
Well, one of the biggest challenges, I think, is information, and trying to get access to what would be regarded as reliable, accurate information on how to prevent cancer in the first place, as well as for those with cancer being able to do things that are safe, with the ultimate goal of improving their quality of life and perhaps their quantity of life as well. And the challenge is that there is a lot of information out there, but how do you siphon through the accurate, scientifically based information versus the information that's out there on the internet and other resources that is trying to sell something? So, ideally, our health information as consumers is coming from physicians and healthcare professionals who have trained for decades in improving our health. The challenge in the area of integrative medicine, as well as, I would add, lifestyle, is that there's not a lot of information in medical school educating healthcare professionals and nursing school and school of public health, PA school, etc. That it's very reductionistic and focused on the biomedical model, less on prevention, and even less on things like acupuncture, herbs, supplements, etc. Now, however, luckily there are resources that are available, and for the listeners, I would primarily orient people to authoritative websites that either end in .gov or .edu versus .com. So governmentally supported websites, and the National Cancer Institute, as well as the American Cancer Society, have information on this whole area of integrative medicine. Many cancer hospitals now have resources that are available through the web that provide authoritative reviews of the evidence behind an herb or a supplement. And these would be .edu type sites. And essentially to steer away from advice that is that has a secondary benefit for you as a consumer to use that particular product. In other words, that they're trying to sell something. The evidence that they may be presenting may be accurate, but get it from another source that does not have what would be considered a pure conflict of interest. And make sure that, you know, anything that you embark upon that, let's say, is invasive in nature. So this would be taking an herb or a supplement, in particular, a large dose of multivitamin, IV infusions, etc., that is discussed fully with your healthcare team. Under certain circumstances and situations, that may be an appropriate approach, even though there may not be that much evidence. But if it's done in a safe, coordinated manner, then first and foremost, the most important thing is in place is the patient's safety. Now, when it comes to things like yoga or meditation, do you need to have approval from your healthcare team? Well, not necessarily. You want to be cautious if you have metastatic disease about weight bearing and doing inversions. But doing seated meditation, relaxing your mind, not a lot of negative side effects that can exist there. But even something like acupuncture that's relatively benign in terms of safety profile, very high safety profile and lots of evidence that it will help with cancer-related symptoms. There are some cautions and contraindications that most healthcare professionals will know about in terms of being able to control infections and bleeding risk. So again, conferring with your healthcare team is the best approach.
Yeah, very true, Lorenzo. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's so much about being able to tease out this information about what is reliable, and like you said, you know, organizations or having access to unbiased resources that can tell you what worked, what didn't work, is quite helpful. You touched on quite a few of them, like cancer.gov, and NCI has a lot of resources on this. American Cancer Society now has things on integrative medicine as well, and you know, talking to your healthcare team when possible about all these different options, what you're trying and not.
I would just add that, you know, what we actually tend to see in particular of the patients who are coming into the Integrative Medicine Center at MD Anderson is often what will bring them in the door is questions about the ingestibles, an herb or a supplement. They're essentially looking for the magic bullet. And we help to guide them in that area to do things that are going to be safe, to get things off of the table that may potentially harm them. But very importantly, we ask them about their lifestyle and what they're eating and how much stress do they have in their lives, and are they sleeping properly, and what are their exercise habits? Because for the vast majority of patients, they're consuming all these herbs and supplements that may cause harm, may cause no harm, but no benefit for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yet they have very unhealthy lifestyle. And we know, again, for the majority of cases, it was our lifestyle habits that it was the instigator for the ultimate cause of the individual's cancer. So we want to take a full holistic approach and first and foremost have patients engaging in a healthy lifestyle that we believe will improve their outcomes.
Absolutely. That's what we see too, is, you know, a lot of times people don't know, unfortunately, because of the information that's out there, or they may not have access to it. They may be looking for a magic bullet or relying on one solution without having looked at whole health approach or diet and lifestyle, and looking at that full viewpoint, you know, our model is focusing on physical, emotional, navigation, and social needs of people. And I know that in your book, you really go into practical aspects of living this whole health life, and and embarking on this lifestyle with the set of tools that you call it mix of six. Can you talk a little bit about those six parameters that you talk about, and how that impacts our health, and why it's important to focus on it?
So we call it the mix of six, and there are six lifestyle areas, and we start and put them in a special order, which we'll talk about. But we start with love and support. We move to stress and sleep, and then exercise, diet, and environmental toxin exposure. So those are the areas that we look at, and we talk about this synergy between them and how important it is to create a positive synergy. And so often, like we've been talking about, we're kind of pelted with little bits of information about diet or exercise. And often we kind of view our health in these silos of just diet. If I could only get that piece working, everything would be fine. But really, it's an overview of all six of these areas, and that you can create a synergy which will help in multiple areas. So we all know what it's like to have that negative synergy where you don't sleep well, the next morning you don't want to exercise, then you choose the poor diet at lunch, you're not as kind and loving towards the people in your life, and so on. And that's a negative synergy. And so what you really want to do is try and create that positive synergy between all of these areas. And you know, the science is there in each of these areas, and it's so important that you understand that there's that synergy as well between them and how they reinforce each other.
And you know, one of the things that's challenging as healthcare professionals as well is that there is evidence, as Allison mentioned, in each of the areas, but less research actually looking at the synergy. And we'll talk about, you know, both the positive and negative synergy and what the evidence actually shows. But most research is also done siloed. So you have a dietary intervention, or you look at what's the link between sleep and cancer, but you don't look at the link between sleep and diet and cancer and exercise. And of course, you know, we are living in a fluid, dynamic world, and we've done a disservice to the population as a whole by doing this very reductionistic kind of research, because not only do we lose the potential benefits that could come from interacting with our world in the synergy and maximizing it, but we also are not fully realizing the potential harm that comes from the negative synergy that Allison was talking about. So this is really kind of the bedrock of our book, and how we tried to position it again somewhat differently. It's not about a diet. It's not about an exercise routine. It's not about how do I get a better night's sleep. There are books that are out there on each of those things, but how does it all interact to be able to ultimately have the positive synergy which allows you to be more successful in each of the 6 areas?
Absolutely. So true that positive synergy is so important. In fact, the symptom clusters, the underlying principle of, you know, things are connected in our life, and so are our physical, mental, emotional health, right? And they all impact one another, whether we create a positive cascade or we create a negative cascade. And to your point, you know, a lot of our research has been focused on one versus, and not on the this connected impact of all of them together. And I think with our cancer patients, or with almost any chronic disease where it's having significant impact on that person's life, it leads to this cascading effect of one impacting the other, and going down either a positive positive direction or a negative train wreck, right? And making it difficult for us to feel like we can come out of it. So I really like the example, Alison, that you shared. Very simple but powerful. I was wondering if, given that both of you had to take on the patient and the caregiver role, in addition to the already busy and full life that you live in your professional and personal life, how did this diagnosis of cancer impact you as a patient and as a caregiver? And did you see these kind of stresses and issues creeping up? And then how did you use this positive synergy to impact in your own life? And what kind of guidance would you have for others?
So, the irony, of course, was not lost on us. That literally the day that we said to each other, we are finished with our book on primarily how to help people prevent cancer, that I actually get cancer. So there was a lot of questioning, and ultimately we never know what caused my cancer. However, we do know that sunburns and multiple sunburns under the age of 20 is the primary predictor of melanoma. And in fact, it increases your odds by over 80%. So similar to the link between smoking and lung cancer. Not all lung cancer is caused by smoking, but over 80% of it is. And what's interesting to note about melanoma, but the same is true of kidney cancer and some of these other immunogenic cancers, meaning cancers that are controlled by the immune system, that the initial DNA damage was probably during early or late adolescence, when I did have multiple blistering sunburns. But the disease didn't manifest itself for another 30, 40, 50 years. And there's actually evidence to suggest in kidney cancer that the initial cell mutation that took place before a cancer ended up being diagnosed happened 50 years earlier. So I can't go back and change obviously anything about my early adolescence, certainly not in the way we view our universe currently. But what I can do is change the environment. And we know that melanoma, as well as other cancers, are exquisitely sensitive to the immune system, so much so that we all know now how important the immune system is in treatment. And I'm actually currently undergoing immunotherapy, and Jim Allison and others won the Nobel Prize for the work in immunotherapy, showing that if you unleash the power of the immune system, that you can help to treat and control cancers. And this is now expanded beyond melanoma, where it started, and in multiple cancer populations as kind of a new frontier in oncology. So at the time of diagnosis, my diet was exceptional, high fiber, essentially primarily vegan, plant-based diet, exercising relatively regularly. What I didn't have on board was a daily stress management practice. And this was something that was critical to get on board right away, balanced by that if I missed a day, and Allison helped to continually reinforce this, that I shouldn't stress out because I didn't do my stress management. That, of course, is going to be counterproductive. So, to be kind and gentle on myself in terms of fulfilling what I knew was anti-cancer living and engaging in the mix of six on a daily basis. I must say, in the first few weeks and months, that it was tremendously humbling to realize how hard it was to engage fully in the mix of six on a daily basis. And I would, be dishonest if I didn't say that it is it continues to be a challenge. We launched a study at MD Anderson that we discuss at length in the book, and we profile a number of the patients, which was essentially teaching and counseling patients on comprehensive lifestyle change and encouraging them to, you know, have a good night's sleep, to engage in an hour of stress management every day, exercise an hour every day, eat a primarily plant-based diet. And when I had my own prescription, I realized, you know, how heroic these women are and what they were truly achieving in their lives as life transformations.
You know, one of the things that we talk about that's so really important is that, you know, you get that cancer diagnosis and you have to leave, or not, you have to leave behind blame, shame, fear. You want to put that to the side so that you can step forward with the small steps that it takes to make change that sticks. And like Lorenzo's saying, you know, in order to live perfectly in these 6 areas is impossible, but it's about living well and making progress and slowly making change and celebrating those changes that you're making and how critical that is. And when he got his diagnosis, if anything, we doubled down on everything that we do and that we believe in, because the science says that we can improve Lorenzo's outcome with these lifestyle changes. And we have been living them, you know, for many years, but we also have our work to do. So, you know, as the caregiver, in my role, I feel like I'm still learning. There's so many caregivers out there who have been at this for years and years, and I see that there's much to learn. But, you know, it's being the support to Lorenzo and trying to help him make sure that he's doing it as well as me and everybody in our family. So it's a juggle for all the caregivers out there. I'm sure they know, right? You don't get prioritized initially, but you have to be very careful that you're being kind and loving to yourself as well as providing support for yourself.
Oh, and caring for the caregiver. You know, if the caregiver doesn't care for themselves, then they're, you know, we know from the evidence they're not going to be an effective caregiver, and then their health starts to deteriorate. So it is, you know, it's important too that the patient helps to prioritize the caregiver. I think something that's important to also mention is that, you know, the fear of cancer and the fear of death when you have a cancer diagnosis can often be a motivator, but we can't continue to live in a state of fear. So, you know, although my initial call to action to try to more fully engage in the mix of 6 was perhaps motivated by fear, ensuring that I'm there for, you know, my children's graduations and weddings and the grandkids and the great-grandkids, etc. That's ultimately not sustainable. And, you know, we've always said this to patients, but I guess I've never fully personally felt it, which is that after actually just a few weeks of engaging in what I know the prescription is more fully than I ever have in my life, I never felt better, ever. And we hear patients say this all the time, that after my diagnosis of cancer and that I've changed my lifestyle, I now feel healthier than I have even prior to being ill. So, you know, that's ultimately what's sustainable and keeps you going to the yoga mat and, you know, staying in the periphery of the supermarket, eating healthy foods, is that you just feel healthier. You reprioritize things in your life in a way that you don't have that call to action. Even though at the time of our birth, we essentially were destined to die. We just tend to not think about it and put it off. Oh, that's something for the future. It's not going to happen to me. So it's it you know was a way to really prioritize and get healthy.
One of the things that I would add to this is that you, in order to make the changes that you want and to take this new diagnosis on, or for somebody who's just looking to get healthy, you have to start with social support. And in order to do all of these things, we talk about this is the foundational piece that's necessary in the mix of 6. And for Lorenzo to be successful with his treatment and the way in which he's feeling, he can do that because he has support around him in a variety of different ways. And we talk about support comes in many different ways. I mean, HelpSee is a great example of a very comprehensive support system that, patients and caregivers can use. You need all kinds of different supports. We need informational support, physicians or experts in a particular area, like a yoga master or, your physician. But we also need technical support. We need somebody who can drive us to our chemo appointments, to can look after our children while we're doing something else. We need somebody who's our cheerleader and who says, you can do this, you can make these changes. We need that person who is the emotional support, who you can tell your deepest fears to. And that person, cannot always be the caregiver. You have to portion out those support systems to people who you interact with. So whether that's HelpSee, whether that's, your physician, it's a colleague at work who's interested in taking a class that you are, the person who wants to exchange recipes. So you really need to spread that support system out so that you can benefit and feel supported in any step that you want to take. One of the things we talk about in relation to food is that we often say, oh, I'm going to start that diet. I know that I need to, trim down a little bit. So you say tomorrow's the day, and by 12 o'clock, somebody's birthday in the workroom has donuts, and then there's somebody who wants to go out for lunch and they don't choose a healthy place, and you feel sabotaged, and it's a very defeating feeling. And that's because you haven't started with that support team in place. You haven't said very seriously to your friend or your partner or group, I'm going to start, I really want to make this change, and I'm going to begin tomorrow, and I'd love for you guys to help me or to join me. So we talk about it like that.
That's wow, you covered so many really valuable points. Just to pick up on where you left off, Allison, I think that having that social commitment and social support is such a huge key to be successful in whatever we are trying to do, or not feel overwhelmed. Right. And I think especially you also mentioned about, being a caregiver and having to have take on so many roles, right? So that need for having a village, having a team is important, because one person, it's very hard to do everything for your loved one, because there are just so many aspects of it to handle. So I was wondering if you can comment a little bit more on 2 things. One, about that loving kindness, because I think many of us go from 0 to 100, or we want to go from 0 to 100, and then when we don't, then we are angry with ourselves, or get frustrated. So having that loving kindness towards ourselves and celebrating little wins is important. And then the social community, the need and the value for that. And I know you touch on that quite strongly in your book, and I love it, because I think that's so important. There are 40 million lay caregivers today in US, and one of the biggest challenges that caregivers feel is that stress and that loneliness, and trying to do it all on their own, to the point that they themselves become patients, right? So having that community and support and kindness for yourself is really key. And I know you both talk about that in your book. Love to hear more about it, both from your personal experience and from suggestions you have for our audience on it.
No, I was just going to interrupt the recording. Do you hear the leaf blower in the background, or is it okay?
No, I don't. It's totally okay.
Okay. Do you want to start from the science?
Sure.
So this area of social support, as we've been saying, is front and center, both for what we call the direct and the indirect effects. So Alison was talking a bit about those indirect effects, that it allows you to be more or less successful in the other 5 areas that you're trying to focus on in your life. But the more direct effects is actually evidence to show that love and support, connection to others, actually modifies our biology, making our body more inhospitable to cancer. So actually changing the way our genes express and themselves and behave. So cancer is a disease of essentially our genes going awry and not engaging in control processes that help to stop a mutating cell from growing out of control. And one of the aspects that's intricately under control of our genes is inflammation, as well, in fact, of what we call the cancer hallmarks, and we describe these in detail in the book. And individuals who are more socially integrated into their network and, in fact, engaging in a life of purpose and meaning, those individuals have decreased inflammation, they have activation of processes that will help to control cancer. So this is happening at a deep biological level. Plus, we know that in particular for individuals in our society who are the primary caregiver, and we do live in a society where women, not to be sexist, but women are more of the caregivers in our society, and that is still the case, although that is starting to slowly change. And so when and we see this with our patients all the time, in particular in our comprehensive lifestyle study that we did in women with breast cancer, is they are the caregiver in the family. They're not used to being in the role of receiving that love and support. So that in and of itself is a new perspective, teaching them to say no, teaching them to ask for support, teaching them that when people actually are providing support, to graciously accept it and learn how to accept support, learn how to reshift unhealthy support that may be coming their way and turn it into healthy support. So it's critical both for the direct biological effects that love and support can have, and importantly to be able to allow us to be successful in leading a healthy life.
So often what's important to remember is it's as important to give as it is to receive. And so the people around you who are offering to give actually genuinely want to give. And when you say, oh, no, I can do it, even though it would be very helpful to have their support, you take that opportunity away from them, which they genuinely give. So it's very important for both yourself to give and to receive. And if you are in a position, for instance, I mean, there's so many different facets to this giving and receiving, you know, from the caregiver standpoint. You have the cancer patient who people are always asking, how are you doing? You know, kind of offering it. Then you have the caregiver, and as time goes on, you know, people go back to their lives. And so it's important to continue to seek that support from those around you, so that you can continue to give the support that you need, you know, to your loved one, and also to get it for yourself. So it's a complicated and involved, but it's so very important to both give and receive. And one of the things that we talk about as well is, as a cancer patient, so often you want to be able to give as well. But that's actually important for your health biologically, like Lorenzo is saying. And so even if that means that you sit at home because you're not able to be out and about, and you knit a scarf, or you do something else for a neighbor, or you talk to somebody on the phone, there's many different ways that you can actually volunteer from your home to kind of give yourself purpose, because that's another part of this love and support, is that it's really important to have purpose in your life.
That's so beautiful. I love, you know, this focusing on giving as well as receiving support, and doing that in a healthy way, because I do think that sometimes as caregivers, we tend to take on the role of giving and not comfortable with receiving, right? And then when we are in the patient role, we feel that we are helpless and we can only take, but there is so much that we can give, and volunteer and have that sense of purpose. That's beautiful. Love it. I was thinking of looking at it also from an organizational standpoint, because, you know, we were talking about there is just so much that's involved when there is diagnosis of cancer for the patient and the family, in terms of all that they need to do. And especially if you're trying to then maintain a healthy diet and lifestyle, it needs, at the end of the day, you need time and resources, both from your community and from your employer, or, you know, the infrastructure around you. So what are your thoughts and value propositions on why you think employers or insurance companies should look at providing this anti-cancer lifestyle, providing this whole health support to the patient and the family when they're going through this difficult time?
Well, I think from an employer side of the equation, there's actually evidence now, and most major organizations have shifted and focused on actually created programs that didn't even exist before, of course, which would be what are classified as these wellness programs. You know, starting with companies like Safeway and most notably Google, that incorporate stress management, sleep hygiene. They've made fun of some of these companies that they have the little nap rooms, feeding people healthy food. One company up in the Northwest actually allowing people to set their own schedules, because some people are more productive in the evening, and if people are feeling burnt out, they can go on vacation, and then when they come back, you know, put in, you know, good 60-hour weeks. So we're starting to see the evidence now to support that from a healthier workforce. And a healthier workforce, thinking about it just pessimistically from the leaders of the company, means that you're going to have less absenteeism, you're going to have employees that are more productive, theoretically more engaged in the mission and vision of the company. So just from that perspective, the return on investment is going to be, you're going to have less healthcare costs in the system, as well as more engaged individuals in our society.
And I think that, you know, as when we talk about strategies in the workplace, but there's a lot that could be done from the employer side to encourage people to adopt strategies that are useful. For instance, Lorenzo at work, you know, walks the stairs, and over time there are more people who are walking up the stairs to their offices. To have the walking meeting, which is a standard thing that he does. You know, if you're only meeting with one other person, it's the perfect opportunity. You can be outside or you can be inside, depending on what kind of environment you work in. So that there's lots of different ways to also increase health in the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think there is data that's starting to show huge impact of it. I mean, if you look at the cost of side effects and adverse events, it ranges from $15,000 to $50,000 per cancer patient. So being able to adopt these healthy lifestyles has a direct impact on saving cost and also on people being able to come back to work early, as well as feeling more productive and ready to be able to take on. So there's such a huge financial impact of it. And I think institutional level support will help us to be able to go through this time and do it in a successful way. I know we are almost out of time, so just wanted to check with you if there is any strategies or any practical tools you want to suggest for the audience in terms of managing stress, or particular meditations or anything that they can use.
I think stress is, of all of the areas, stress is the most challenging, or can be the most challenging. For those of us who've grown up in North America, it's not part of our everyday routine. Some people use prayer through their faith, so that it does work in that avenue. But one of the things with stress that we talk about is that this is really a time where you need to carve out a specific amount of time and dedicate it to a mind-body practice. And we encourage people to find a partner. So reach out to somebody in your community, a colleague, a friend, a child. We have lots of cases where people do it with their kids. And you either go to a 6-week course on meditation, or you can do what we did in our house, which was that we just simply downloaded a meditation off of the internet. We would sit down before the kids went to school, and we would do as short a meditation as 2 minutes, and kind of built our way up to 12 minutes and spent that family time working on developing a meditation practice. So it's one of the areas that you really have to carve out that time and to develop a practice, and it's an individual thing. So whatever works for you and your situation, that's important, and that you want to try a lot of different things until you find the thing that works for you. So yoga, meditation, Tai Chi, there's so many different options out there.
The key is that you do something, and of course the best mind-body practice, the best practice to help relieve stress is the one that you're going to do every day, ideally on a daily basis. Now, there is some evidence behind this, and there's a lot of research supporting this area. And listeners need to know that even as something as short as 20 minutes on a daily basis will have a very measurable effect, again, down to our genes and the way our genes are behaving, our immune system, our stress hormones, let alone aspects of your quality of life and just feeling better. And another thing to note that for me as a motivator to engage in a daily practice is that by engaging in a regular stress management practice, it allows everything else you're doing to not only be easier, but to be more successful. Because there is evidence to show that even individuals who are eating a healthy diet, if they have excess chronic stress in their lives, the beneficial effects of that healthy diet are going to be diminished. And we know the effects of chronic stress on our relationships, on our sleep, on our interest and motivation to exercise. And that's where you really get into negative synergy, is when you let stress get out of control and you don't prioritize that over other areas. And once you can get your stress under control, it actually becomes easier to manage all of the other 5 areas of the mix of 6.
One of the tools that is effective and that I use is that, you know, you can have very busy days, and so you might not be able to get to your yoga practice until after work, or you know, in the morning. So I do these mindful minutes, and you wash your hands, and you just very mindfully wash your hands and focus on that activity. You can take, you know, 3 deep belly breaths at every red light you come to while driving to work or from work. And one of the things is that it's easy to say this, but you have to remember to actually do it. So I tie a little something around the steering wheel, and that reminds me, until I get into the habit, that I need to, now I'm at the stop sign, or not the stop sign, but the red light. Now I need to, you know, take those 3 deep breaths. So it's a small thing, but it actually adds up, and it takes it down a few notches so that then you can move forward.
Yeah, beautiful. I think such nice practical, I think, both wisdom, you know, about how we can think about it, as well as practical tips on how to handle stress on day-to-day, given our busy lives. So Lorenzo, do you want to show your book and where people can find it? It's such a great book. I encourage everyone to go check it out and read it and enjoy Lorenzo's work.
So yeah, the book is available where all books are sold, online, as well as, of course, bookstores. It's now available in a number of different languages around the world, and importantly, for those in the U.S., of course, our second language is Spanish, so it's available in Spanish and in Portuguese and Italian and German, etc. So hopefully people will get this message, and it will provide them with at least a start on their journey to anti-cancer living.
Great. Thank you so much, Lorenzo and Allison, for your time and for your thoughts. We learned so many wonderful and important things. And to our audience, I hope you found lots of little nuggets of knowledge that you can take with you today, and as you live through life, all the ups and downs that we tend to face. Hope you go check out Lorenzo's book. We are all here for you to help you with supporting your quality of life and providing you with resources and anything else you need so that you can live to your healthiest. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again next month.